YouTube. Okay, we are learning now. We're going to go into Gemara we haven't started to learn yet about, which is going through Eicha. We're going to go through the Gemara, which Eicha is the Lamentations on the destruction of the temple. Hold on, let me bring up the. So yeah, we've been talking about a little bit about all the kings and various kings in the times of the first temple, both of Yehuda and of Yisrael. And now we're going to go actually just a section that deals a little bit with the time of the destruction. We're understanding the Eicha on the destruction. Okay, so we're on the bottom of the page, Kuf Daled 104a. Tanya. So this leads us into Eicha. Tanya, we learned. Let's bring in the Mefarshim. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Elazar, said as follows. Now, again, what happened was King Chizkiyahu was a righteous king, a very righteous king. We learned in the beginning of Chelek that Ratzak Kadosh Baruch Hu lasses Chizkiyahu Mashiach. God wanted to make Chizkiyahu the Mashiach. Chizkiyahu stood up to Sanhedrin. We learned about the whole battle of Sanhedrin, the miracle on the night of Passover of Bachatzi Alayla, that the angel came and struck the armies of Sanhedrin, of Assyria, from Nineveh, and dispersed the armies, and Chizkiyahu was saved. There was all these amazing miracles that happened. He was sent messengers by the king of Babylonia then, and as a praise to the miracles that were happened on his behalf. Like we said, the sun that set early at the passing of his father Achaz, those hours were given back in the times of the miracles of Sanhedrin, of Chizkiyahu. Now Chizkiyahu also was sick. That's part of the story. He was sick, and he was told that he would die. One of the reasons is he didn't get married, and then he goes. He agrees to get married. He has 15 years. He davens to Hashem. He doesn't accept the prophecy of Yeshayahu. It's a famous idea that we learned that a person should never give up, even if he's told by the prophet, "You're going to die." Hey Shuki, he still doesn't give up and he davens. But in the prayer that he davens, so here we have Chizkiyahu davens. God answers his tefillos, but his wording isn't what you would say to God's 100% desire. And what he words is, he says, this is the boast thing that we talked about. He says, Bishvil, the Gemara says, because he said in his prayers, V'hatoiv beinecha sisi, and I have done what is good in your eyes. That's part of his prayer. He's telling God, I did what you wanted from me. I was a good king in hard times, right? His son was a horrible king, Menashe, and his father was a horrible king, I think, Achaz. So I did good. I did toiv beinecha sisi. So because of that, he says ma'ois. He asked for a sign. When Yeshaya said that you're going to be healed, first he said you're going to die, and then he said, God, listen to your prayer. It means there's a prophecy that happened as Yeshaya was standing there when Chizkiyahu, it says he put his face to the wall. And he prayed. He didn't accept the prophecy. But he asked for an ois. He asked for a sign. That also wasn't good. He shouldn't have asked God for a sign. Bishvil ma'ois, because he said, V'atoiv beinecha sisi, that I did good in your eyes. And so there's different mefarshim how they learned this Gemara. Did his saying that I did good in your eyes cause him to say, I want a sign? It means when he already started when he boasted and said, I did good, then he already also asked for a sign that was already part of the consequences of not presenting his tefillah properly, or he said two wrong things. There's different mefarshim that explain it. We'll see. So because of that, what happened was Nacharim Achla Shulchanai. Like I said, the king sent. We learned about him, Mordech ben Baldan, right? The one who looked like a dog. So he sent. Who did he send? Nebuchadnezzar was described, and he went back 3 steps to say to properly address the letter to King Chizkiyahu. But they came to his table, and he fed them in a meal. And we're going to see soon that his wife waited on them, and these are all things that were not approved. Because these Gentiles ate at the table of Chizkiyahu, which was obviously something that was a negative. Garm Galus Levanov, that caused that there should be the exile, including his own child that ended up in Bavel, which was Menashe that we learned about when he was taken captive. This also supports the teaching of Chizkiyahu, which is a rabbi in the time of the Talmud. Amar Chizkiyahu said, "Kol hamazamid of oived avodah zarah toich ba'isa yumashamish I love." If you invite an idol worshiper into your house, and not only invite them, but also wait on them, mishamish I love, you wait on them. Goyim golis levanov. That's worthy, so to say, to cause an exile for your children. Your children should suffer exile. How do we know? Because part of the prophecy that Yeshaya tells him is umibanecha asher yetzu mimcha asher toilid, from your children, when Yeshaya came to admonish him for what he did in his treatment of the messengers, the emissaries of Merudach ben Baldan, which was the king then of Babylonia, and Nebuchadnezzar was his scribe or the head of messages. He said that your children are going to end up in Bavel, and not just Menashe, but the Jewish people were exiled to Bavel. So what started, so to say, even though Chizkiyahu himself was destined or could have been the Mashiach, see, it shows you the spectrum of how fast you could be from extreme of redeemer to exile, where because he was almost going to be the redeemer, but instead of being the redeemer, certain things that weren't on the up and up according to the level of Chizkiyahu caused almost that things should spiral into the situation that they get exiled. They always say you have to always look like life is on that thread hole that you could be either you're in or you're out. And he wasn't Mashiach, and from that came the worst of things. In the same happening, it wasn't like another story. It was all around that same happening of when God wanted to make him Mashiach. Sanhedrin, he got sick. He invited these idol worshippers to eat in his house. His wife waited on them, and then that led to not to the redemption, but to the destruction, to the exile. So Rashi says, "B'shvil tov ma'ois." So what does this mean? So Rashi explains, "B'shvil Chizkiyahu sheshibach atzmai." He praised himself. He boasted. I did what you wanted from me. Goes to show you have to be careful even when you daven. So to say, what did he was asking for God to heal him. He wasn't lying. He was boasting and lying are not the same things, obviously, right? And nevertheless, at the level of Chizkiyahu, was considered unfavorable that he did that. The Amar Atayv Benecha Sisi Garm Lai Shamar Mai Ois. Rashi learns, unlike other Mefarshim, that what caused him to ask for a sign was because he boasted. If he would have been more polished or refined or dedicated in his tefillah, he would never ask for the sign. But because he boasted, so he asked it for the sign. I mean, you can analyze it. It's not such a crazy concept. What Rashi is basically saying is that he had a certain level of lack of bittul, so lack of self-nullification of what his grandfather David had, and because of that, he says he boasts, and when he boasts, he also is not just going to accept the prophecy. He asks for a sign. So he says, "Ma ois ki ella." How do I know, Beis Hashem, I'm going to still be able to go to the house of God? That I'm going to be healed and go to the house of God. Sheshol ois mekadosh baruch hu, she'avera gereres avera. One sin leads to the next sin, and they call it an avera. The avera that he boasted is the next avera. The next thing he does, he asks for a sign. There's no isolated incidences in a person's life. A person goes down paths. So you open up one door, that's going to lead you to another door, and you continue going down that way. And what happens? He invites the idol worshippers to eat at his table. Who are we referring to? Which Gentiles are we referring to? Is Mardich Baldan. Sufrim, that that they were the emissaries that he sent the letter of praise, great King Chizkiyahu, from the great God, and he sends him gifts because he saw that the sun was held up, right? The whole story that he slept in, and he thought his waking up servants didn't wake him up on time. He was going to punish them, but he realized that there was a miracle, so he reacted to the miracle and he sent a gift. And what happened was Chizkiyahu was taken by the gift. It's all part of the same. It's the same thread of issue here. He boasts. He asks for a sign, and he feels special that he's being gifted by idol worshippers. This is one of the things the Chachamim were very upset what he did. And what happens next? He attends them, not him. His wife attends them. We learned that caused friction in their marriage. We're going to learn his wife poured drinks for them, and that wasn't sneeze. He was trying to be, a good host and do what they would do, as opposed to what Jews do. And Jews wouldn't have the wife go and wait on them. Goyim Golis, and that will cause that there should be an exile. Chizkiyahu v'yar es kol beis nichta v'chsiv b'asreim v'necha sheyetzim chayichu v'yisrisim b'echel melech Bavel. The first it says that God Yismach Aleim Chizkiyahu is very proud. He showed them the beis nichta. We'll see what that means. He showed them different places. I think in certain places they say he showed them the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He took them into the Holy of Holies. He was trying to show them the miracles, the beauty of the Beis Hamikdash. You never should have taken them in to show them the Holy of Holies, but we'll see in a second what that means. And because it says that afterwards that your descendants are going to be sarisim, are going to be servants in their house, right? Hanani, Mishael, Vazariah, Daniel. These are from the Beis HaMelech, not just the Jewish people, but they're from the house of the king. Hanani, Mishael, Vazariah were servants of Nebuchadnezzar. So what is he? So therefore, and what happens afterwards? He gets told the prophecy that his kids are going to go into exile. So now he says, what happened? So the Gemara says, "Vayismach aleim Chizkiyahu." He's very proud that he's glad that they came and they honored him. Again, you have to remember this is all in the highest level of a tzaddik. A righteous person is being held accountable on the highest level of their actions. It's almost impossible to walk on eggshells when you're so righteous. I mean, who doesn't take pride? And it wasn't like he was taking personal pride. He was taking pride in God, and he was taking pride in Torah, and he was taking pride in the Beis Hamikdash. But he was at the end of the day, as he was giving them value. Not that he should have been rude to them, but he shouldn't have taken vayismach aleim. He shouldn't have taken the pride. And he showed them the Beis Nechaisa. It's a kesef, it's a vazav. He showed him the gold and silver of the riches of the kings. It's a psamim, it's a shemenatov, the good spices, good oils. Amarav ma Beis Nechaisa. What did he show them? What's the Beis Nechaisa? It says ishta yishkas aleim. That bias is like the different translation, but bias, when we say bias, a lot of times chiper ba'ada you ba'ad beisai. Right, that in the Kohen Gadol we just done Achri Mois, Avi Yer Bal Koira. So it says v'chiper ba'adu bad beisai. What's beisai? Beisai is ishtay. That the Kohen Gadol has to atone for his family, his wife. So what? Ma beis nechaisa. Beis nechaisa is that his wife hishkesarlem. She waited on them and gave them to drink. Shmuel Amar beis genazav heralahem. He showed him his treasuries. I think I remember somewhere saying that he showed him the Holy of Holies. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Zayin Oichel Zayin Heralahem. He showed him his spectacular weapon. Zayin is weapons that eat weapons. A kind of one metal that's stronger to break another metal. One weapon that could break it. He showed him his. So what does a person boast today, right? What is it when a king has a birthday, right? He takes all the tanks and the missiles out. That's what they used to do, right? Pari would show everything. I think they're saying that someone here is going to do something now to show for their birthday. They show, how strong we are. So he did he showed how rich he was. He showed how beautiful his wife was, or he showed his armaments. He showed how his strategic armory. That the hidden stuff that the Beis Yehuda, the house of Yehuda had. He showed it to them. So he was bragging. And so what does Rashi say? Ishta yishkas aleim. He atzma. She herself. She's the queen, right? She shouldn't be waiting on them in any situation, but especially she's the queen. He atzma mezekas lahem. She herself poured these guests. Again, we learned some. I can't remember where. I think we learned somewhere that caused the friction in their marriage. V'hainu beis nechasa lashem menaka al shem tzela shenifchasa min adam imenu nivra isha. So Rashi learns. Why is it called Beis Nechasa? Because the woman comes from the man, right? It says that Adam fell asleep and was menaki. He lost one rib, Tzelan, from there God built the woman. So he called Beis Nachala the place where he was lacking, so to say, of his person, which the woman first woman came from man. So there's a hint to say that she waited on them. But the Yad Ramah says you don't have to get so complicated. But like I quoted, but Beisa is a Ishtay that his wife is in the word. It says Beis Nechoisa. The word bias is the wife. The Mashal says that it's he showed them it's an oitzer that a woman. It's actually a nice Mashal. A woman is a person's treasure. And just like a treasure is supposed to be hidden, it's supposed to be kept private. You don't show people your treasure. You shouldn't. So his Beis Nechoisa means his treasure. He shouldn't have taken his wife out on display for these people. She's not a display piece. She's a treasure, something you have to hold precious. It's for you privately. It's not something that you boast about. So he had no business showing her off. And Achashverosh does that. Chizkiyahu doesn't do things like that. That's something Achashverosh does. And also, it's a woman it's supposed to be tzinu, it's supposed to be modest. It wasn't a way of modesty. So Beis Kenozav, what does it mean? V'hachim targim on Beis Ginzihu u'menachem is the place of hiding. Menachem paser b'machbarte lashon samamonim k'moineches v'tzari v'loy, different spices also. So he showed him treasures, he showed him spices. Zayin echel zayin k'koin parzela d'shalt beparzela, different metals that could break other metals. It means that today you would show a missile or a tank or a machine gun, and then they would show, they didn't have those kind of equipment, so they showed other spectacular armor, things that would boast the power of Chizkiyahu. So Rabbi Steinzat says, Beis Nechoisa Ishtay, according to Shmuel, some explain that's a reference to his wife from the word bias, like I said before, Beis Zu Ishtay, the wife is the house. As Rabbi Yehuda says, his house, that he would call his wife his house, that is his wife. The Gemara in Yuma says. The Ramah also, the Mashah, he quotes the Mashah that says, explains that just as his treasury is concealed from public view, like I said before, so too his wife should be concealed from public view. Your wife is not a display piece. With regard to that, to the explanation that it's weapon, zayin, that breaks another weapon, he says it's similar to the word haka, meaning to blow, like one stick hits, or one sword or piece of metal hits another piece of metal. The Ramah cites a variant reading. He showed them food and spices. Okay. So what did we just say? We just said that because Chizkiyahu boasted, asked for a sign, he ended up not handling this, so to say, praise from the king of Bavel in the way that was expected from Chizkiyahu. Again, they sent him a letter, they sent him a gift. He was under pressure from other countries, and instead of taking the opportunity to boast about God better, I think some of the rabbis say he should be more praising to God at that point. He was boasting about his success and about the king's success, about his wife, and that led to exile. So now we're going to go in for the rest of the class about different things of the Eicha. The Eicha is laminations that Yirmiyahu that we read on Tisha B'Av. So how do we start off? We start off Eicha Yashva Badad. So how does the city sit in solitary? Badad is to be solitary. Amar Rav Rabbi Yochanan. Rav said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that he says like this: why would they? Why was the punishment in the word Eicha? Eicha is like, how does the city sit in a way of crying? Because the word Eicha, if you look at the number value of the word Eicha, right? Chaf is the number value 20. Yud is the number value 10. So together we have 30. Hey is the number value 5. And Aleph is the number value 1. So 20, 10, 5, and 1 is 26. So the word Eicha is a hint to why were the Jewish people punished to suffer this destruction of the temple and the exile is because they transgressed the 36 prohibitions that are punishable by krisos. Krisos are punishment by death from heaven, or the word cut off, to be cut off. A lot of those are what we read about in last week's parsha about sexual misconduct and other things, or the ways of avodah zarah. So because they transgressed 36 transgressions that are punishable by krisos, by kares, so therefore the word eicha is a symbol to that, which is the number value of 26. Eicha, Rashi says, lamed vav begematria is 36. Sorry, not 26, 36. Lamed vav krisos, bekrisos chashiv lehu. There's 36 of the krisos that they violated. There's others, but these are the ones that are counted. Rabbi Yochanan continues, and he says, the other one wasn't Rabbi Yochanan, was Rabbi Rav in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we have Rabbi Yochanan himself. He says, "They ma laku ba'alef beis." Why is the eicha in the alphabetical order of Aleph Beis Gimel, starting eicha? So mipnei she'avru ala Torah shenitnu ba'alef beis, because the Jewish people transgressed, they violated the laws of the Torah that was given in the Aleph Beis. So the Torah is made up of the 22 letters of the alphabet that tell us all the laws of the Torah. They went and they transgressed all those laws. Rashi says that the Aleph, the Eicha is in alphabetical order. We have that many times in different parts of Torah and Tefillah, like the Deres Emunah, right? That are Adon Olam, that are all not Adon Olam, Kel Adon, which is also on the Aleph base. There's, I don't know who this, he says, he quotes an idea that what the point over here is that there's two ways to look at the whole eicha. We look at the eicha to talk about the what happened or why it happened, the cause of the effect, right? So the effect is the destruction. The effect is exile. The effect is the loss of the house of David. But what Yirmiyahu is really saying in the Eicha, he's not talking about the punishment. He's not talking about what happened. He's talking about why it happens. That's why the Eicha is talking about what's behind the words is not that Nafal Mashiach Hashem, Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem. It's not about what happened. But what Yirmiyahu is really telling us why it happened. Because you violated the 36 laws of Torah that are krisis. You violated the Torah that's in the Aleph base. Things don't happen by chance. It's not that the Jewish people are taking the situation. Again, this is a very dicey conversation that a lot of people don't like to have. Of how do we understand destruction, punishment, and bad things that happen, especially to the Jewish people? Is God punishing us? A lot of people say you're not allowed to say that. So of course we don't emphasize to talk negative. But at the same time, the Rambam says clearly to ignore that. The Rambam calls it the achzarias, that if a person doesn't want to take into account that God is talking to us sometimes through admonishment, is achzarias. That's the Rambam says in halacha. So there's at the same time, like, after October 7th, this became a big conflict of how people people did not want to say negative, and we shouldn't say negative. At the same time, when Yirmiyahu talks in the Eicha, which is a destruction of the Jewish people, like October 7th was, he says you have to ask yourself what were the things that led to these situations. Okay, so he says like this: overall, that they violated the Torah which was given in the language of the Aleph base. Some explain that the Book of Lamentations was written alphabetically as an allusion to the fact that the Jewish people committed every sin that can be spelled with the Hebrew alphabet, and that they were punished with every punishment that can be spelled with the Hebrew alphabet. So the letters versus the letters. You violated the Torah in the Aleph base, every sin that could be written in another letters of the alphabet, so too you've been punished in every type of punishment. Again, it's a difficult conversation to have. It's not, you have to also, it's no point in pushing people down if you have to motivate to tshuva. But part of tshuva is, like the Rambam says, is to recognize this, the concept of consequences. That's what Eicha is. Yashva Bedad, what does it mean to sit in solitary? So Amar Rava says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, again, name Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. God tells the Jewish people, it's an amazing Gemara. Ani Amarti, I wanted, when you say I said, a Yishkan Yisrael Betach, that you could sit secure, Badad, and in solitary, because one of the signs, right? We learned that Moshe Rabbeinu asked the spies to check how the nations were settled. Even mifsarim, right? If the mifsarim, to see their mindset. If they all live together, means they don't feel secure. If everyone only lives in a gated city, and someone's scared to have a house out in the mountains alone because then they're going to be terrorized or robbed or worse. So that means that they don't feel betach, they don't feel secure. God said, "Vayishkin Yisrael betach badad." I wanted them to be able to sit in solitary as a sign of positivity because you're so secure on your borders. Not everyone wants to live in a city, right? A lot of people want to be able to own a house out in the mountains, a house out in the place that I could live alone. I want that option. But if you can tell a person that no, if you're going to go buy a house of yourself out in the Galil somewhere, you're going to be, who knows who's going to show up at your house. You have to live in a city. So that's not betach. So God wanted to bless the people with betach and therefore badad. That out of security you could live in solitary. In Yaakov, El Eretz Dagim V'Tirosh, in the land of grains and fruit and vineyards. Avshamam Yarfutal. However, now you're going to be in solitude, not because of security, but because you've been taken out of your home. What does it mean that the people have a lot of? I'm not sure this part of the Gemara. I'm not sure what it means, but it says Ha'ir Abasiyam. It continues that the city that was full of people, right? So what does it mean? The city full of people? Seemingly that's a good statement. Also, when it says badad in Echa Yashav badad, not just in solitary, that the Jewish people live in solitary, out of their home, but that's the punishment for many generations, right? The ghetto. What's the ghetto? The Jewish ghetto was that the Europe said, I don't want the Jews okay, fine, they'll be whatever they live in they bring to the economy, but they need to be living in a ghetto. What was the ghetto? That's Yeshiv Badad, to sit in solitary. Don't be amongst us. So God wanted it to be solitary and a positive, and they ended up being in solitary. The Goyim, the nation said, okay, you could live here, but not with us. You have to live in the ghetto. The ghetto is an expression of Yeshiv Badad. So what does it mean, Ha'ira Basiyam? What does it mean that he had a lot of people? So he says, the city full of people. Amar Rav Yochanan, Rav again says his name Rabbi Yochanan. Shahayu, again, I'm not sure if this is a positive thing or negative thing. I'm not sure how to take it. He says, Shahayu Masim Katana Legadol. They would marry off young girls to older men, Ugdaila, and older women lekatin to younger boys. Why? Rashi explains basically that if young boys marry young girls, it's harder to have children. Well, older, we don't mean old, but I'm saying more mature women are more fertile than young women, and older men are more fertile than younger men. So they would put the older men with younger women, so the more fertile with the less fertile, and therefore that makes it easier to have kids than if you just put the fertile with the fertile and the less fertile with the less fertile. So I'm not sure if the Gemara is just saying it as a statement, as a fact, or as criticism, or as praise. It doesn't say either way. But it says like this. Rashi says, "Batach." We're just saying a fact that they had a lot of children. It seems in the Gemara, for some reason, it seems to me it's a critique. But it doesn't show it. It doesn't say it's a critique. Batach badad sheyishun yechidin. They'd be able to live alone. They weren't scared. They wouldn't be scared not of Gentiles coming into your house. I could have a house out in middle of nowhere. I always wonder today in Israel if like in America, if I wanted to go in Seattle to the Cascades and buy myself a few acres of land and build a house there, I can pretty much. But could someone go today in the middle of the Galil and just buy a house? How secure are you? So they weren't scared not of the nations that were to come and attack them. That's what God was hoping. So were the elements, both the elements or nations, robbers, whatever you want to call it. So that they would feel secure to live even isolated, alone if they choose to in their own communities. It says the Jewish people. It seems like it's a praise. The Jewish people were a people that had they multiplied. Why? Because they married the fertile to the non-fertile. And he explains it, Rashi explains, Katana Lagadol, why did they marry a younger girl, we're not talking about infants, younger girl to an elderly boy, was because Shifcha Zera, the semen of cotton of a young boy, Einim Mevushal isn't what they call Mevushal, isn't ready, fertile, the Einim Azriya Maher doesn't yield children fast. Kishagadol, like an elderly boy. V'chein rechem, also a womb of a katan, of a younger woman, ein keletes doesn't so to say grab or doesn't absorb maher as fast kishal gadol, like an older young woman's womb. Therefore, what they would do is they would marry a gedola, an older girl, to a younger boy. Because as soon as he's ready, she'll be ready to have children. They would marry a young girl to an older man, not older, but elderly than a young boy, and that she should be able to get pregnant faster. And they wouldn't marry young boys to young girls, that they would have to wait to have children. So basically, when Yirmiyahu is saying, Eicha Yashva Bedad Ha'ir Abbas Yam, there's a lot of people, it seems like he's just saying it as a matter of fact. Why would the Jewish people say multiple? Because they focused on building families. And they were so focused on building families that they married to be able to have children as fast as possible. Rashi says clearly, we're not talking about literally cotton, young children to get married. One who are ready to get married, but they're early in that stage. They're not, their semen isn't ready yet, but so they'd rather marry off older women to younger men, and younger men and older men to younger women. All right. So then it says that in Echad, again, there's no indication if it's a positive statement or negative. Or maybe just matter of fact. If someone sees something else on their own Gemaras, please let me know. Haisa Kalmana, we were like a widow. So we all know that in Torah, it doesn't say Haisa Almana, we were a widow. Haisa Ki Almana, we were like a widow. Chafadimion, it's called in grammar. It's as if, but not exactly. Amrav Yehuda Marav Ki Almana v'Lay Almana, like a widow, but not a widow, mamish. And what's the point? I mean, we want to say the Jewish people became like a widow. What's a widow? Widow means we're like a widow from God, who's our husband. So we have no husband because the destruction of the temple. So it says, no, you're not a widow, you're like a widow. Alakisha, it's as if a woman shahalach bayal medina sayam, that her husband left her, or didn't leave her for good, but went on a long journey to the other side of the, Medina Siyam is an expression of to overseas, right? But eventually will come back home. But nevertheless, she feels abandoned because he's on this long trip for whatever reason. And Rabasi Bagoim Sarasi b'Medinas. What does it mean, Rabasi Bagoim? Great amongst the nation and princes among the provinces. Amar Rav Rabbi Yochanan. Rav again says the name Rabbi Yochanan. Kol Makim Shein Hochim, wherever the Jewish people go, Saran Ladneim, they become masters they become princes to their masters. And meaning to say that the Jewish people never, that's why in history, not always, not every single person, but in history, even through the generations of the exile, there were always court Jews, there were always important people, part of management, part of government, part of industry. That we didn't get lost in the exile. We were shining in the exile. And that's part of the blessing of the Jewish people. Again, Rabbi Stein says, again, they're missing an important piece of the Gemara here. The last line is missing. So if you have your own Gemara, if you're looking at it in another source, in a Safari or what have you, you must probably do have this line. So the Gemara just continues. Taner Rabbanan, I'm just going to read it from the inside I have over here. Our rabbis have taught. Ma'isa b'shnei b'nei Adam. There's a story of two people. It doesn't say who these people were. Shenishvu, they became captives. Obviously, maybe around the time of the destruction of the temple. Bahara Carmel, in the Carmel Mountain. Carmel Mountain is what's known as the mountain above what's today the city of Haifa. And their captor was walking behind them. So the Gemara says you have two people that were taken captives in the mountains of Carmel, and again over Haifa in the north by the sea, and their captors behind them listening to their conversation. So now we're back to the original text. That's on the top of the page 104b. It says, so these two captives are in conversation with each other, and they say, I just want to go back a little point I wanted to mention. Then Yaakov says that what is the point when we say, I want to go back, when does it mean to say, what's the emphasis? Ki almana la almana, that the Jewish people are like a widow in the time of the exile, but not a widow, it's only like her husband. went to Medina Sayyam, went overseas. There's halachas about a husband who travels overseas. And we're just learning these halachas now in one Perek Rambam about a woman who says, my husband went overseas, he didn't leave me anything to live on. So the Bezdin goes into his estate and takes from his estate that should give her money to live. A husband who goes overseas has an obligation to still take care of his wife and family. So that's, then Yaakov says, that's what the Yirmiyahu was saying, that we're not a widow that has no one to take care of us. Our husband, meaning God, went overseas. And when he goes overseas, he has obligations to us. So even if we're in the exile, even though we may feel like we've been abandoned, but we have to know that God still has to take care of us, like a husband who goes overseas who's responsible to take care of his people. So too the Jewish people are have to be taken care of by God. Aaron, you want to ask something? Okay, we continue. Omer loy echad milchaver. Again, so we have two people that are captives that are in the Carmel, and their captor is walking behind them. But so one of the captives says to the next one, in observation of this walk that they're having. So they're seemingly, what happens is you have the captor is behind, the two captives that are in front of him, and in front of them is camels that belong to the captor being guided by two camel drivers. So in observation, the two people say to each other, this camel that's walking ahead of us is blind in one eye. So the guy's listening, the captor is listening to this conversation, that the camel is blind in one eye. And he's carrying two flasks, so to say, that achas shal yain v'achas shal shemen. One has wine, means they're close, and one has oil. Ushnei b'nei adam hamanhigim oisa, and he has two riders or guides that are guiding this camel. Echad Yisrael v'echad Nachri. One is a Jewish, I guess he was also a captive, Jewish person that works for this captor who's Jewish, and one is a Nachri, is a non-Jew. So that's what they say to each other. I'm quite certain in a Gemara like this, although there's a point to the story, I'm sure there's a lot of hidden secrets in Torah that are about the details of this conversation. But that's I'm not privy of that information. Amr them Shabai. So the captor says to them, Am if you stubborn people. He didn't like their certainty that they were talking like they knew some things. He called them stubborn people. Where do you know that from? How can you just decide that the camel is blind in one eye, and there's two riders? They didn't see the riders, or two guides. One is a Jew, one's a Gentile, and there's two flasks hanging off the camel, one of wine and one of oil. How do you know all this? So one of the captives said to the next captive, this camel is blind in one eye. So they told him like this. How do we know that the camel is blind in one eye? We're watching, as we're watching to see where it eats. If it had sight from both eyes, it would be eating from both sides. The fact that we could see that what it's eating along the way, it's only eating from one side, mean the camel's blind on the other side, so it doesn't see the food, the options to eat on the other side. So she sees and she eats, and she doesn't see that she doesn't see food on the other side. So we could see it's only eating from one side, so we could tell it's blind from one eye. When we decide that it doesn't see, it doesn't eat. And how do we know that it has two wineskins, one with oil and one with wine? So he says, because the drops that drip out, it's leaking. So the drops that drip out of the flasks that is wine seep into the earth, because wine is something that could be absorbed. Shemen doesn't seep in, right? If it's oil, will fall on ground, it will just sit on top of the ground. So we could see that there's some of the liquids are going into the ground, some is not going into the ground. So we made an observation that there's oil in this. Again, I'm quite certain something in Hasidic teachings or Kabbalistic teachings, there's a lot of insight in everything, all the details that we're saying now. Shemen and Yain are two levels of Chachma, right? It's two levels of God's wisdom. The Torah is called Shemen, the Torah is called Yain. How do we know there's two people leading the camel? Echad Nachi v'Echad Yisrael, and one is a Jew and one is a Gentile. So he says, because this, we could see how they're relieving themselves as they're just going along. They relieve them. The guides relieve themselves, right? Like sometimes animals relieve themselves as they walk. Nachi nifna derech, the Gentile just relieves himself in the way. Yisrael nifnel tzaddim, the Jew is more modest, and he doesn't just relieve himself as on the way. He goes to the side to relieve himself, not to relieve himself in the middle of the road. So we could tell one person has tznius, has modesty, and the other one doesn't. So we could tell one is a Jew, one's a Gentile. So Rashi says, because we see the camels not sometimes eating from the right and sometimes from the left, like a animal that has proper sight would eat from both sides, and because she only sees and she eats and she's only eating from one side, so therefore we could see clearly that it's blind in one eye. Because the wine drips and seeps into the earth. When we're walking behind the camel, we see the drops that drip from these wineskins, so we could see one side the liquid is seeping into the earth. And the other side it's just sitting on top, so it's oil. They knew that the Jewish people are modest and the Gentile would not be. Again, you have to remember that it's not just an idea. We know one of the mitzvahs in the Torah in Kiseitze is that when we go out to war, a Jewish soldier, has to be equipped with utensils, so he or she could go to the bathroom like in a way of tznius. That's part of it's a halach in Torah. So that's something that the Torah is conscious about, that you don't just go and relieve yourself wherever you want to. You behave in the way of tznius. The Yad Ramah says, this is also a story that's not just in the Gemara, it's a story that's brought down the Medrash. Again, there's obviously much more insight to the story, but he says that the reason why the captor, which was obviously a Gentile, struck out at them in anger and called them Am Kshayoyr, you stubborn people. Why does he use this term Am Kshayoyr, stubborn people? Because usually when you go into exile, you lose your dignity. You lose all the things that you pride yourself with. The Jewish people were a people of knowledge, a people of chachma, of smart. And they were, he thought that going into exile, they would lose their dignity, they would lose their self-respect, their intellectual dignity. And he says, you're stubborn, you're holding on stubborn to your wisdom. Everything you're analyzing and you're looking, how much, you think you're smart, you're in Galus now. Stop trying to be so smart to figure everything out. That's what the Yad Ramah says. And you still hold yourself, because we just finished off saying, this is a connection what we just finished. We just finished off saying when the Jews go into exile, they still stay to be masters, to be sarim, to be masters, to be princes amongst their masters, that even in our exile, we hold our dignity of self-respect and success. We bring success where we go. And so he lashes out, Am Kshayoyr, if you stubborn people, why are you staying? I heard a story from my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was sent, his name is Reb Shmuel Vitta, my father's grandfather, was sent to exile in Russia, to Siberia for spreading Judaism. And he wasn't the only one sent there. He said a lot of other religious leaders, priests that were sent, and other business people, different people that were, that were respectable people, knowledgeable people that were sent, and he said they fell apart. When they were in Siberia, they totally lost all self-dignity. And he says the only reason he was able to keep his dignity was because he learned Chassidus, and Chassidus teaches how a Jewish person is supposed to have mind over matter in the hardest situations. But because he was educated to be aware of such a situation and know how to deal with it, he was able to hold his dignity. But he said other people that weren't educated or experienced, they didn't have exercises to hold their dignity, totally fell apart. So he says, when he sees these people, they answered him, and that they're still using the chachma. So what did the captor do? It says Radaf Achreim. He ran over to them or after them. He ran after them. I mean, he himself didn't know what the situation was. So he ran and he saw that the camel was blind and he had wine and oil, and that one was relieving himself on the road and one was relieving himself on the side of the road. He saw they were right in their observation. He came and he kissed them on their foreheads. And the Vesan, he brought them to their homes, and he brought them to their houses. I guess he took them home. He made them a big meal. He danced before them. He understood. He said, he praised Hashem for choosing the descendants of Avram. He saw that they were worthy people. And he gave the Jewish people from his wisdom. that they stay dignified even in the hard situations. Wherever they go, they become princes to their masters. And he let them stay home. Means he was going to take them as captives, but because he was so impressed of their ability to stay dignified, even in difficult situations, so he let them be. And not only that, he praised Hashem. Okay, the commentators go into to the specifics of his praise. Why did he say Bachar Avram? Why did he specifically bench Avram? But let's go further. He says, Radif Hashavoi, the captor, Derech HaGamal, he ran to the camel, Ba'amanhig, and the person who's leading the camels. He saw that what he said was accurate. And the Jews said about this captor, Adoneim Shehu ben Cluster Melech, not exactly sure what this means. I'm not sure if this is part of the ending of the Medrash part of this story, not the Gemara part of the story. But the Jews said about this captor that he evidently he looked a bit like Cluster Melech. He had of the king. He looked a bit like the king because he was born out of wedlock from the king. Okay, and again, there's probably a lot of insight to all this. It's not a simple story as it just may seem. Okay, let's continue. This is part of Eicha. So it says she cries, talking about the city of Jerusalem, or the Jewish people, she cries at night. So it says Bachai Tifka. Bachai Tifka means there's two expressions of crying. Why does it say Bacha Tifka? It should say Bacha Balayla, she cries at night. Why Bacha Tifka? So Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi says now, before we had Rava saying the name of Rabbi Yochanan, now we have Rabbi that says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. There's a story that was told that when the Alter Rebbe came out of prison, he was also imprisoned, obviously, for spreading Yiddishkeit. The whole story of the Tanya, Yutas Kislev. So one of the things he had to do was he had to go and meet different leaders of the different communities. And he went to one leader who wanted to test him. He said, "How many times does it say Rav and Abai in the Torah, in the Talmud?" Which is a hard question. Today you have Google; it's easier. But then they didn't have Google. You had to be knowledgeable in all the Talmud to know how many times it says Abai and Rava. So he said a number. He says, "You're off by one." So he said, "No, because one is a mistake, Rab and Rava." I don't know if this is the mistake, but before we had Rava said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and now we have Rabba. Rabba was Rava's uncle. So Amr Rabba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Oh, not sorry, he was his teacher. Could be uncle also. Amr Rabba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba says he was Abai's uncle. Amr Rabba says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Echad al Amigdash Rishon. One is to symbolize the Jewish people cried for the first temple. Tifke, the second crying, is al Migdasheni on the second temple. Balayla at night. Al Iske Laila. What's the mean at night? Because of what happened at night. Shenemar that we know that there's a direct connection to Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temples, and the Jewish people's reaction to the spies. So the spies came back after 40 days. They came back on Tisha B'Av, and they cried on the night of Tisha B'Av because the Jewish people believed the spies, and they said, the God is taking us to land that we're going to be destroyed in Eretz Yisrael. We can never conquer it. It's not conquerable. That was their report back. So they cried. God said, you cried that night, you're going to cry in this night in the future as well. So the connection of Bacha Tifcha Balayla, why did we cry on the first two temples? Because of Balayla, because we cried the night when the spies came back. Because they cried a baseless cry. There was no basis for the cry. They didn't trust God. They didn't trust Moshe Rabbeinu. So Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba says again, name Rabbi Yochanan. What night was the night that the spies came back, that the Jewish people cried? Was the night of Tisha B'Av. God said to the Jewish people, you're just going to cry a baseless crying. It's going to end up being a time that you're going to cry for generations on this night. And when's that? The night of Tisha B'Av, we all cry, we all mourn the destruction of the temple. So he says in the notes like this: some sources calculate the time of the 20th of year. How does it come? How does it work out that they cried on Tisha B'Av? So he's on the time of the destruction of time of the spies. So you have to remember, just a quick calculation. The Jewish people were redeemed on the 15th of Nisan. On the 49 days later, we received the Torah. Moshe goes up for 40 days, and he comes down and they build a golden calf. So now Moshe spends the next 80 days, 2 times 40 days. He goes up 3 times to God. He comes down after 120 days on Yom Kippur, right? So the 80 days is he atonement, and he receives the second tablets. He comes down the morning after Yom Kippur, and he tells them about the tabernacle. They build the tabernacle. When do they dedicate the tabernacle? They dedicate the tabernacle in the second year, or the end of the first year, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, first of Nisan. Vayom Hashmini is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the 8th day. And then the first Pesach they keep. We just learned about Pesach Sheni was the people who took out Nadav and Avihu, according to some opinions, or the people carried the Ark of Yosef. But that whole story, Pesach Sheni, happens in the second year. The Jewish people start moving when they count. The Jewish people counted in the second year. When does God want to go into Eretz Yisrael? They receive the Torah, they got atonement, they build the tabernacle, they're ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. So when does he send the spies? On the 20th of Iyar. The 20th of Iyar, which is 5 days after Pesach Sheni, 6 days after Pesach Sheni, he sends the spies. When the Jewish people departed from the wilderness of Sinai, they traveled 3 days and remained in Kibrot HaTaiva for 30 days. As they waited 7 days for Miriam's leprosy to heal, the result is that on the first day of Tammuz, the spies were sent to the land of Canaan. Sorry, so they're stuck 30 days in Kibrot HaTaiva. They wait another 7 days for Miriam. Turns out, so the 20th of Av, another 7 days, is the beginning of Tammuz, the first day of Tammuz. Count the first day of Tammuz, the Tisha B'Av is 40 days. The 40 days, the spies. If Tammuz was a full moon on the 30th day, the spies returned to Moses on the 8th of Av, and that night, which is the night going into the 9th of Av, they wept due to the report of the spies. Okay. Davar Acher, another opinion is, Balayla. So one answer is Rabbi says name Rabbi Yochanan, that the 2 times they cried at the 2 temples was because of the night, meaning because of the night that they cried on the baseless cry on the report of the spies. So that the calculation we figured out, we have to go back 40 days because we know it says clearly in the Torah the spies only spied for 40 days. So 40 days minus Tisha B'Av would be the first of Tammuz if it's a leap year. And where do we get the first of Tammuz? So they had to wait 30 days from the first of Iyar when they traveled. The first traveling is the first of Iyar. So that's 30 days plus 20 days plus they have the time they waited for Miriam. What does it mean by night? To signify the direness of the crying. The crying at night, there's less noise, right? So when someone cries at night, you hear a person wailing at night. There's another thing. It's a good time to cry. I don't know if it's a good time or not, but the fact is, he says that if you cry at night, the cosmos listen to a person who cry at night. Doesn't say why. At night, that's a time when the kachav mazal is boichnimai. See if it says over here, commentaries. He says one of the Ramban on the Chumash says that where do we know that who says that it's talking about the night of Tisha B'Av? So he says because it says Balayla hazeh, they cried in that night. Whenever it says zeh, not who, Balayla hu, it says Balayla hu. It should have said Balayla hazeh. The fact that it says Balayla hu means a special night, a night designated for crying. Okay, so he says that whoever cries at night, it says why? So it says Shemesh virech kadroi. Because you see the stars more at night, so therefore the stars cry for a person who cries at night. The stars cries with you. Another idea is another idea is that people cry with you. So we have it's a cry. Your cry is being heard. When you cry at night, the stars cry with you because the stars shine at night. And the other thing is that people cry with you at night. Ma'isa b'ishachas, it was a woman, the Gemara tells us. She was the neighbor of Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi. Shemeis B'na, her son died. Doesn't say why, obviously. But she would cry for him at night. Shama Rabban Gamliel koila bacha kenegda. Rabban Gamliel would hear her crying and he would cry. Kenegda means, there's different opinions, means he would cry for her pain, or she would remind him, like Tikkun Chatzos, he would cry for the destruction of the temple. It means once everyone's crying, everyone cries their own pain. So she started to awaken pain, awoken the pain within him. he was crying for the destruction of the temple, for the galus of Shechina. He cried to the extent he lost his eyelashes. He was crying so much. So his students were not so compassionate. When the students saw what was happening, that Rabban Gamliel was crying because she was crying, so they said, "Yeah, very nice." They kicked her out of the neighborhood. So I'm not sure what the message of that is, but basically the student said, there's a time and place for everything, there's a limit for everything, and you're crying, it's all nice. Yeah, we feel very bad for your pain, but you're causing the Rosh Hashiva to cry, the Nasi to cry. And he's overreacting, so to say. Like he's really taking it personal. So they asked her to move out of the neighborhood. It says, Koila Nishba Yosef Bayayim, a voice of crying is heard by night more than by day. Like it says in Yuma, they ma ein hakol nishma b'yom k'balayla. They gagel chama menasir b'rikia. The sun kind of puts down the sound. That's what it says. They cried at night. She cries at night, so we should have. So the idea of crying is not just to cry out, but that there should be compassion created by the cry. She can't find consolation. It's an amazing idea. I don't even know what that means, but it says this: the suns and the cosmos and the stars cry with a person, and they have compassion. A person cries against a person who cries at night. When you hear the pain of a person, the pain of the person's heart, to cry with them. But Rabban Gamliel cried to the extent that the Risisi Einav, Sa'ar Shebebava Seinai, the eyelashes, Haynaifel v'nichbal ala ayin mirayv d'mais, they would fall maybe into his eyes. So the students felt there's a concept. You say that in the war, in 1940s, people would write very negative letters to the previous Lubavitch Rebbe of all the things that were happening. And they wrote up a letter that when Richard the Masman was Chassid, was burnt alive in the synagogue by the Nazis. They say the Friedrich Rebbe had a heart attack. After that, the Rebbe did not let letters into the Rebbe was the son-in-law of the Friedrich Rebbe. He would start to edit the Friedrich Rebbe's letters. He would not let these letters come to the Friedrich Rebbe because he was reacting so strong to the situation of the Jewish people and the Nazis in Europe that the Rebbe said the Friedrich Rebbe wasn't healthy. He would not let these letters in. So there's a concept where Talmidim have to do what's right for their Rebbe. And the Talmidim of Rabban Gamliel had to do what's right for their Rebbe. So they asked her to move out of the community. In the Medrash, it stated, I guess there's a Medrash also about this, it stated that her crying led Rabban Gamliel to recall the destruction of the temple. It wasn't that he was crying so much for her pain, but when people are crying, you start crying for your own pain and the anguish over the destruction. Okay, let's go a little further. Okay, we'll do one more piece. He says, "V'dim'asa alacheha," and the tears are on her cheeks. Again, now we go to Rava. Rava says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Again, there's certain very strong personalities in the tradition of the Mishnah and the Talmud. We have Rabbi Yochanan, who constantly quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We see the tradition of ideas, not just so much halachas, but ideas of Agadah that is passed on in tradition. So Rabbi Yochanan is always quoting about the destruction, about the redemption. Rabbi Yochanan is quoting Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was from the author of the Zohar. His birthday is this Thursday. His yahrzeit Thursday night. So there was a tradition of these things. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would be quoted by Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav and Rabba, which were the leaders of their generation, were quoting Rabbi Yochanan. So we see clearly the chain of tradition even within the ideas of Agadah. So Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Rav says the name Rabbi Yochanan. Ki isha sheboicha bal nu'reha. What does it mean that she has tears on her cheek? What's that signify? Like a woman who cries on the husband of her youth and her, on her first boyfriend, so to say. That's the special one. Shnemer Eli kipsula chugara sak al bal nu'reha. Like it says, laminate like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. This is a famous thing that we learned about Yahayakum. The reason why Yahayakum burnt Eicha, this Eicha that was written, Lamentations was written in the times of the temple. It was written by Yirmiyahu. This is what's going to happen, and they burnt it. They burnt the book of Eicha. That tradition hasn't changed. If you burn something, it's going to deal with the issue. So they burnt. Yahayakum burnt it. He burnt the Eicha. Why did he burn it? Because he saw it says the tyrants were the adversaries were the people who were in charge, the king. The king is the worst guy in the story. So Amar Rav Rabbi Yochanan, Rav says name Rabbi Yochanan, call him Meitzir Israel. Whoever is a tyrant or an adversary to the Jewish people, Nasir Reish becomes a leader. It's a famous Gemara that says that Unkelis, who became a ger, brought up the soul of Titus, who was the destroyer of the second temple, and he says it's called Sarah Hayit Sarah Reish. If you want to get elevated in life, be a tyrant to the Jewish people. There's an idea behind it. The idea is a kind of a menucha, that at least we're not being destroyed by nobodies. If someone's going to hit me, let that person at least be a somebody. So Kol Meitzer Yisrael Nasir Reish Shnemer Ki Loi Mu'af Lasher Mutzak La Ke'es Harishon Hekel Arza Zevulun VaArza Naftali VaAchron Hichvid Derech Hayam Ever Hayardin Galil Hagoyim. He says, he quotes, for there is no wariness to him, means a sign of strength, that is set against her. There's no wariness for a person who goes against the Jewish people. At the first, he lightly afflicted the land of Zevulun, the land of Naphtali, and afterwards he afflicted her more grievously by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan and the Galilee of the nations. If you're going to be a tyrant to the Jewish people, you're not going to go tired. We see that with our enemies till today. We'll just do the Rashis and finish here. It says, Lacheha also means moisture, like someone it's a sign of youth. Eli koina kina mitargum eila kina, which is laminations, is when we say Eli al bal na'ara shebaychet tamid mutzius dimois. She always has tears for her first husband. So he says, what does it mean? Call a Meitzer Yisrael Nasir Reish, the Taisvus, and I think it's, where's the Taisvus say that? He says some explain that in difference to the Jewish people, the person or nation that will ultimately torment them is elevated beforehand by the Holy One, blessed be He, so that the Jewish people must be conquered. They will be conquered by a noteworthy person or nation. It means the idea is if someone's going to hurt us, it shouldn't be a nobody. This is Rabbi Steinsaltz is quoting this Taisvus. I myself once asked Rabbi Steinsaltz, Al Vasham, he passed away. He was the rabbi of my shul. We learn his Gemara. It's our honor. So I asked him once. I said, "Why does Avram Avinu take gifts from Parai, and he refused to take gifts from the king of Stone?" Says Stone wanted to give him gifts. He says, "No, I won't take a shoelace from you." But Parai gives him gifts. Why is that okay? So he said the same answer. He says to take a gift from Parai is respectable. Who's the Melech Stom? He's a nobody. Avram doesn't take gifts from anyone. If he's taking a gift, he's taking a gift from somebody. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Laila Tov, and a happy Lag BaOmer. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.